In any human interaction, there's this hidden current of power. And it has almost nothing to do with what's actually being said. It's operating silently, right underneath the words, and it's deciding who gives in to whom. Today, we're going to map one of the most powerful forces moving in that current. I mean, really think about it for a second. Whether you're in a negotiation, a relationship, or just a simple conversation, why is it that the person who suddenly goes quiet or, just becomes unavailable, why do they seem to gain all the leverage, like instantly? What is actually happening in our minds in that moment of silence?
Okay, so the first thing we really have to get our heads around is the signal that's being sent. This isn't about being rude or aggressive. It's something way more fundamental. It's a counterintuitive signal about value and about need.
Most of us tend to believe that power comes from asserting ourselves, right? From arguing our point better, persuading, making demands. But the psychological reality is, well, it's totally different. The most valuable, the most scarce resource in any interaction is just focused attention. And whoever controls that resource, well, they control the whole dynamic. This right here, this frames the whole mechanism perfectly. See, when you consistently give someone your attention, you're validating them. You're creating a baseline and expectation. So by suddenly pulling it away, you don't just create silence, you create uncertainty. And the human brain is just wired to resolve uncertainty as fast as possible. It forces the other person to start working to get that validation back.
And look, this isn't some isolated trick you pull out of a hat. This signal is part of a repeating pattern that plays out across pretty much every area of our lives. We're all playing these attention games, whether we know it or not.
This really shows you the disconnect between what we think creates influence and what actually does. On the left, you've got all these actions that take effort. They reveal how invested you are. But on the right, those actions signal you're less invested, that your attention is a scarce thing, and power always flows towards scarcity.
And you can see it in action right here. In a negotiation, going silent is often taken as a no, which forces the other side to sweeten the deal, just to get you back to the table. In dating, the person who seems less needy often gets pursued more. And in social groups, ignoring someone, that's the ultimate status play. It basically says your input isn't even worth acknowledging. The pattern is absolutely universal.
So, at the end of the day, your reaction is a piece of data. It tells the other person exactly how much you need this interaction to continue. The one who can just disengage, who doesn't have to react, is showing they're less dependent. And because of that, they just accumulate power.
All right, so we've seen the signal and we've seen the pattern. But what's the subconscious engine that's driving all of this? Why does our brain react this way? Well, it really just comes down to a simple economic principle that's been applied to our psychology. This is the key concept: attention scarcity. It's just like gold or diamonds. Attention has value precisely because it's limited. So when you make your attention freely and constantly available, you actually devalue it. But when you make it scarce, you automatically jack up its perceived worth, and you'll find other people start working a whole lot harder to get. So the process unfolds like this. It starts with a stable connection, a predictable flow of attention back and forth. Then, in step 2, that flow just stops. This creates a kind of psychological vacuum, a disequilibrium. The brain immediately flags this as a problem that needs to be solved. And so, in step 4, effort just naturally starts flowing from the person feeling that absence toward the person who created it.
This is the brutal, simple truth of the whole mechanism. Constant availability signals you don't have other options. Scarcity, on the other hand, signals high demand and high value. It's a status signal that operates completely beneath our conscious awareness.
So what happens to people who are completely unaware of this dynamic? They fall into what you could call the predictability trap. They're constantly losing leverage, and they have no idea why.
The person caught in this trap is actually pretty easy to spot. They're the ones who always text back immediately. They're the ones who fill every silence because it just feels so uncomfortable. They're chasing for answers, for approval. Their behavior is a massive signal of their dependency. And because they're so predictable, they become really, really easy to manage.
And this chart, it visualizes the result perfectly. The reacting party ends up doing the vast majority of the work. We're talking 85% of the effort, just to keep a connection going that the other person is barely even tending to. The entire balance of effort has just been completely upended.
Now, understanding all this doesn't have to be about manipulation. The real advantage here isn't learning a bunch of tactics. It's about gaining a whole new layer of perception. It's about seeing the game underneath the game.
See, most people are operating on the surface level. They get all caught up in the words, the topic of the argument.
The advantage comes from shifting your focus to that deeper level, to start watching where attention is flowing, who's reacting, and who is signaling need. You're no longer just an actor in the scene, you're also watching the director.
So the essential shift, the real game changer, is moving from just being a participant to becoming an observer. You start to see the invisible machinery of human dynamics. You see not just what people are saying, but what their patterns of attention and reactions say about how dependent they really are.
And all this brings us to the final step. It's time to turn that analytical lens inward with a simple little attention audit. This isn't about judging anybody. It's about seeing what is already shaping you. So, first question. In your life, right now, whose attention or validation are you spending the most energy trying to get?
Question 2. In your most important relationships, who's quicker to respond? Who works harder to close the loop when communication just stops? Be honest with yourself.
And finally, who has access to you? Is your attention a scarce, respected resource? Or is it something that pretty much anyone can claim from you at any time? The answer to that might reveal more about the power dynamics in your life than you think.